I have a feeling that's going to come back and bite him on the keister. Thanks, Turbik. Wow. That was kind of a strange way to end the game, but if they knew they were going to make a sequel, then it's really not that strange. Yeah, they just kind of hook you there at the end where you... Now I want to play the second one to see what happens. Like, despite what everybody says about, you know, liking it or not liking it, like, my curiosity has been piqued right now. So let's see. You should play the Left Behind DLC, James. It's pretty good. Yeah, I might do that. Not tonight, but I might down the road. Let's see. Awesome playthrough, James. From 1 to 10, what did you think of story and gameplay? Honestly, I felt like the story got better as the game progressed. Like, which kind of makes sense, but it didn't really follow a normal kind of story structure where it's like they have sort of a exposition and rising action and all this stuff. It kind of felt like my interest in the story just kind of slowly went up and up until the very end, and now it's like I want more. If that makes sense. The gameplay, I could take it or leave it, honestly. I think there were some fun parts. I think the most fun I had playing the game was probably tonight in the hospital, hunting down the fireflies. That was pretty fun. I enjoyed the winter scene where you're with David in the lodge, like sneaking around, trying to outmaneuver him. That was pretty intense and interesting for a boss fight. I think that the gameplay is showing its age if the story is not, if that makes sense. I think there's been a lot of improvements as far as like stealth gameplay and just kind of action gameplay in general. It has a realistic feel to it, which is good in a way, but it's kind of sluggish in a realistic way. It's sort of like how I appreciate the realism of games like Gran Turismo, how the cars work and operate and look amazing, but it's just not that fun to play for me because it's too realistic. I want something just a little bit more fantastical and silly and fun. You know, even if it's not at peak realism, I want it to be fun. And for me, the gameplay, while very realistic as far as like swapping weapons and crafting things and healing yourself, while it is very realistic, I didn't feel like it was as fun as it could have been. And I'm willing to forgive some silly game mechanics here and there. Like you press a button and you heal yourself. It's not realistic, but it works for, you know, an action game. So it's good. It's just not my favorite thing ever. So that's pretty much it. Good story, good music, great acting. I think my favorite thing about it was the voice acting and the character animations, their facial expressions. Very, very good, especially for something that came out in 2013. I mean, they captured the human emotion really well. And I think that the biggest flaw in a lot of games as far as like immersion in the story is the characters' facial animations and their eyes. If their eyes look weird, you're not going to believe any of it. You're not going to fall into it. And the eyes really sell it for me in this game. The way that the eyes move, and you can tell what they're looking at. And it might seem like a small detail, but it's a big deal for me. When you play a game and, you know, the characters are talking to each other all cross-eyed and like looking off in the distance, you can't really take it that seriously. But they did a really good job with that in this one. Pretty good music, but I felt like it was underutilized. I think that the sort of acoustic guitar parts of the soundtrack were really good, and I wish they'd have done more of that type of stuff. But I don't have a whole lot to say about the music. It was good, but I wanted, you know, a little bit more variety besides just standard sort of stealth action fare. But let me see. The DLC is only a couple hours. Well, I might dive into it again here in a few days. Then I see you enjoyed it more and more. Yes, Dwayne, I did enjoy it more and more, and but I think my problem with the game too is that it's so hyped up. Like it, so many people say it's like the best game of the generation. A lot of people say it's their favorite game of all time, and so that's a huge bar to meet for somebody new coming into it. And it definitely didn't meet those high expectations for me, which I'm disappointed in that respect, just because everybody says it's amazing, it's the best game ever. Well, you hear best game ever and you think, oh gosh, this is going to blow me away. And it was good. It's a solid game, but I certainly wouldn't call it like the best ever. It has its good qualities, but I just look for different things in a really in the best game ever kind of thing. That's what Death Stranding is like. Story gets better and better. That's another one that seems like it would have a similar kind of, I would feel similarly about Death Stranding. It's real story heavy, and the focus of the experience isn't so much on the gameplay itself, but the character development and the story, which is fine. But for those types of experiences, I really prefer to watch a movie or a miniseries or something. I feel like this was made, the story was made first, and then they sort of put gameplay on top of it. And I prefer more of just like solid gameplay experience with a good story added to it. But just my 2 cents. Let's see. Gameplay is way better in part 2, especially with the prone and dodge mechanic. You can craft arrows in part 2. Well, that's nice. I think it's worth me diving into number 2 just to see the changes. Obviously, I want to see what happens with the story, but I want to see how it plays differently and how it looks differently, because just from the little clips I've seen here and there, it looks really good. And so I'm not going to jump into it right away, though. I've got a ton of games that I want to play right now, and so I don't want to just back-to-back The Last of Us 1 and 2 because they're so similar. So I want to do a little bit more variety and then come back to The Last of Us 2 probably here in a few months after I've slayed a bit more of my backlog. So yeah, you should watch the alternate ending on YouTube now that you've finished. I probably will. I'll probably watch that after this is over. James, just let you know the person who voiced David was Nolan North. Why do I know that name? Nolan North. That sounds familiar. Let's see. Yes, he could do that, but he can actually know what they're talking about when the second game starts. Hey, I got a trophy. No matter what. Anyway, The Last of Us is my favorite games of all time, and God of War second. Having experienced it in 2013, it was mind-blowing at the time. I can see why you don't feel that way in 2021. Actually, I should mention Seraph O. Storms left a really thoughtful comment on, I think it was the Last of Us video on YouTube. He left a really good comment about his thoughts on the game. And yeah, I totally get why the people that say this is like greatest of all time or one of their favorites, why they think that. Like, it makes sense to me. It's just not my personal favorite thing. And that's what it all comes down to. Games and movies and things like that, they're so subjective, and it all just comes down to personal taste. And if I had to give it like a score, if I had to give it like a 1 through 10 number, which I don't really like doing, I would probably give it an 8. So it's solid, but I think that it's a little past its prime gameplay wise. Let's see.